to our, what is it? Monday, July 11th, budget deliberations. Sarah or Cammy, you're gonna kick us off?
Yeah, thank you, commissioners. It is, we really appreciate everyone getting us their budget worksheet information early, and we've got it all combined. I don't know if there's anything commissioners want to discuss or talk about before we start reviewing the worksheet. Any outstanding questions or anything like that? Or is everyone comfortable just jumping in?
This is Commissioner Portillo. My preference is let's jump in, see what those worksheets look like, and then discuss from there.
Great. So Cammy, can you share your screen? Oh, yeah, hold on. Let's get you over. Okay. All right. You want to scroll to the top? All right. So we're going to try to make it big enough that everybody can see it.
Oh, I need something.
Yeah, you might
need to
need
highlight
to scroll over is sort of, I only get one of Portillo, the O.
Yeah.
You probably do, as long as we can see the number. All right. I have it separately. So we can just generally, the best way we have found to do this is to just sort of scroll down until we see if there's one or two commissioners have a question on a certain item, and then we can kind of go from there. I know there's a couple of cleanup items we wanted to talk about. So the first under administration would be the Housing Stabilization Collaborative Direct Assistance. Yeah, are you sure you opened the right one?
There we are.
Oh, there you
I'm
go.
sorry, I'll get it.
A little hard. Yeah, now Portillo's
I
kind
know,
of,
I've got to pull you back in.
it might have to be a little smaller.
I'm just gonna make this field smaller so that we can get more in. There we are. Okay, that's better.
So we had 3 commissioners all express some interest in adding sustainable ongoing funding to the Human Services Collaborative. We've got different amounts.
I'll say, excuse me, I definitely want an amount in here, and I am open because I see that my fellow commissioners want something potentially a bit higher. My only issue is that I want to make sure we're doing a lot for housing. This fund, while we need to make it sustainable, I have some major concerns about how are we approaching housing kind of from a broad strategic perspective, because if we just keep trying to pay for people's rent over and over again, that's not actually creating long-term affordable practices. I think we need funding to do that. That's what I see this funding going towards. We had a lot coming in through CARES Act and ARPA. A lot of that is going to go away. That's going to be a big shock to the system. So maybe we need to cushion that with a bit more this year, but I also get really concerned about if our whole plan for affordable housing, which it isn't, like we have lots of other things, but where can we be the most strategic with our dollars for affordable housing?
This Commissioner Reed, I tend to agree with all of that. I don't, my 225 number is a little bit arbitrary. I decided, like to go with 75% of the request. I do want to make some investment there. Overall, I tried to be relatively conservative with the options I picked. And so I scaled a couple of them back in an attempt to try and lower the mill levy overall. But I would agree. I just think that I want to increase the amount right now because Sarah's at 65,000 is the annual budget. Line item for rent and utility assistance.
Well, there's
Is that
125,
125. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't have that in front of
but
me.
that's kind of all in for program money and direct assistance.
yeah.
So I
Thank
don't
you.
know that that full amount would not go to direct assistance.
I have some wiggle room on my number. Yeah, not, I think to Commissioner Portillo's statement, I think you're right. I haven't figured out how we sort of be respectful of all the needs that are out there and sort of wean ourselves off. I think we heard that, you know, from the state funding, it's at $11 million. And so, you know, how, and we did do some with ARPA, and it's just those things start to go away. We should have an ongoing funding source in this for sure, but I'm willing to wiggle here. But yeah, this is a hard one to figure out what the right number is. So maybe we can keep going and come
Yeah.
back to that one.
Mhm.
And
The next one is the Housing First, ongoing sustainable funding for the Housing First initiative. And all the commissioners have the same amount, so I don't think we've got any, so we'll go
Okay.
ahead and put that one there. Oops,
Behavioral Health Summit.
yeah,
and that's not on the
Okay.
list.
so yeah, let's just keep
Let me just keep
scrolling
going to
down
one
until
you
we
guys
find
put.
one that there's.
You
Which
wanna
I
discuss
have
this or come
as
Heartland?
Heartland, mine's
Since I'm the one that put something on there, again, I was looking for things, I had a goal of trying to bring down the mill levy more than half a mil at least, somewhere between half and full. So I would say, I mean, I have some, wiggle room on this. Where I came up with the 75,000 was, I think, in the, information provided to us on Friday by Heartland. That was the cost of the ARPN, I believe, of the three things, but I'm open to other commissioners' thoughts. I think ultimately, I mean, we kind of started the discussion that maybe what we fund through Heartland, we might restructure, think about restructuring how we think of them as a funding partner. So I'm supportive of this particular ask that they made and how it aligns with behavioral health, and it is part of that integrated healthcare for substance use and behavioral health needs in our community. So I do think it's an important ask. And yeah, I'm open to other.
I found the information that we were sent Friday pretty compelling, that the amount that we're funding doesn't fund the entire program. And I think this program is one that there aren't other funding sources for all of the money needed for this one. So I am very open to kind of talking through, are there other dollar amounts? Because you're right, this one's kind of arbitrary. This is how much we used to fund. We're no longer just doing funding based on whatever, we're trying to fund a specific thing. What we saw in the numbers presented Friday is that the specific thing we're funding, we're not funding all of. So I guess part of it is how much of that do we want to fund? Are there aspects that we want to fund, aspects that we don't? Because there is some, there's definitely some, we made the numbers fit how much the funding was. I guess the question is, how much do we want to fund? Because I think this is an important, it's something that if people are doing medically assisted treatment, they're going to have these terrible outcomes and have nowhere else to turn. So is that something we want to support?
so I want to commend Sarah on this one for sort of sitting down and visiting with a partner and saying, does this align with where the priorities of the commission are? And how is it more project-based? And I think there's a number of partners that we need to sit down and have that same conversation with. I don't know that we have the capacity for all of them. So I think at some point we need to sort of talk about what is a strategy, because there are a couple of numbers in here that we just pretty much hold steady every year. And I want to make sure that we're visiting with them. And as we talked about in some of our earlier meetings and the presentations, you know, if we're putting money to this, are we seeing the need decline because we're doing an intervention. And so therefore the need should decline. And so therefore the dollars may or may not. I just want to have that conversation about, you know, is that working? I think in this is a very good example of that discussion and how that discussion goes. And so I felt like in reading the information that was provided, this does align with where we're trying to go. I appreciate a partner stepping forward and saying we've rethought our model here and it does align with where our needs are. The fact that it's the same dollar amount makes me a little suspicious, you know, but I also recognize that they were putting some money in towards it.
This is Commissioner Reed again. I appreciate both your points and I do really, I support the request and do appreciate that it is a good example of how we, you know, shifting maybe a bit the conversation and the intentional partnerships that we are trying to build. I would agree with you, Commissioner Kelly, that the number is, I think, maybe a little bit what I'm stuck on, but I think that that's a conversation that we can revisit later and maybe in the larger context of more partners like you mentioned. So I'm good with fully supporting this funding amount.
I appreciate the commissioners talking about this, and this is something I'd like us to talk about, before a pandemic. This was an area where I was hoping we would spend some time focusing on, how do we want to approach our support for community partners? And we're going to see it as we continue to go down this list. I get nervous when we're in a space where we're funding or offsetting a portion of uninsured / charitable care, particularly in the healthcare space, because that need is substantial throughout our community. And where do we decide whose charitable care are we going to cover and whose are we not? And every year those agencies will come back to us and ask for more, and they will have documentation that will show that they cannot support all the community's need for charitable care. I can also tell you, just in my experience with local governments, it's just, we cannot meet the need of a lack of a robust funding for healthcare in our nation. So I would like us to have something a little bit more defined where possible as to how we want to enter that space. That's piece one. Piece two, like Patrick said, a lot of these have been set up this way because, in many cases before my time, that was the funding amount that was requested. As we try to move away from community partner funding and more towards this, a cost of service model or a fee for service model or project-based model, what are are our priorities the same? I think all of our community partners are doing great work and they're putting this all towards good use, but does it align with commissioners' top priorities for our community in terms of where these dollars are spent? Sometimes I think it's easy for some organizations to just ask for the same amount and fly under the radar. But I don't know if that means that we're 100% happy with, happy is not the right word, that the funding aligns with the top priorities of the commission.
I hear what you're saying, Sarah, and I completely agree. We need to figure out long-term strategies for this. I think with this particular ask, because this is one where it's healthcare and criminal justice system coming together, it seems to hit right in that bullseye area for funding priorities from our commission. I also 100% agree with you. Like, the county is being screwed by a state that will not expand Medicaid. If we expanded Medicaid, our local funding dollars would go down. And that, just in case you're wondering, we have huge outsets of state pressure because we don't have enough funding for healthcare, and obviously federal pressure because universal healthcare would lower everyone's taxes at the local level in a huge and important way. And I think that this particular ask, while it does seem a bit arbitrary because it's the same number that was asked for last year, not supporting a program, is going towards a program that makes a lot of sense for what our goals are. So I don't know if that means we want to adjust the amount this year or want to say, like, this is the direction we're moving towards. now let's start thinking kind of long-term through more logical aspects of how we do it.
Well, I think and Sarah mentioned this is something that we've been working on for a while, and we've made some progress on those agreements and what those data outcomes are. I feel like this year we sort of need baseline data on this program since we really don't have any data. And then as we move forward, looking at data and saying, is this the right use of dollar? You know, are we making a difference here? Is it too early to tell when we get to Kansas Holistic Defenders? That's the argument I'm going to make there, you know, as we just don't have data yet after a little less than a year. And so how do we look at that? But I think you're right, Commissioner Portillo, this hits us right. I think it's strategically is the word you might have been looking for, Sarah, being very strategic about where we put our dollars for the values and the priorities we have as a commission.
Yeah,
Okay,
let's fully fund.
I'll put a pin in that,
fund it,
and then
and
that's something we can talk further
Yeah.
about as we move through this process.
And to your point, Commissioner Kelly, you know, when we have some baseline data in the future, that can help us make a more informed decision about a number instead of just carrying over the same number year to year.
Okay, the next one is the Project Lively position, and I see that you're all on it unless you have something to speak about.
Well, Kimmy, I think that for that one, Commissioner Reed was saying, let's go ahead and keep the funding at that
Oh, yeah.
proposed rate, and then we'll come back to.
So if it's not in the results
that-
column, it's,
So
Okay.
it's in there.
Oh, okay. You're right. Sorry.
You're
Thanks.
you're fine. I just wanna, I did leave it in there. It's highlighted because it was put in a different place last year.
the next one is Project Lively. All the commissioners included support for an additional case manager for that position. The next one would be Kansas Holistic Defenders.
And so I want to say that if it's highlighted here in Kelly's column, he did put funding in for it in the commissioner contingency line. So he can speak more.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So we have that commissioner contingency line. We've used that before. I'm not comfortable adding any more dollars to Kansas Holistic Defenders right now until we have that data report. There was the opportunity for them to provide they provided some limited, I would call them data, you know, how many people they served. But I think we really expected this to have some impacts in our community that I'd like to see some data on. And so I did put some dollars there in our commissioner budget for it. I just want to hold on to it right now. So that's just why that's there.
This Commissioner Reed, I did not include this one. I'm certainly open to it. I think my hesitation about including dollars for this request is, well, we had a number of community partners ask for increased operating costs. And I'm pretty sure down the line, I decided against that across the board. I'm trying to think through my head, there might be an exception in there, we'll get to and I'll remember, but so I'm not opposed to, I will say that part of their request that I found the most compelling to want to fund was the case management software system, part because of what it sounds like is the robust amount of detailed data that it can and will collect. But yeah, my hesitation was, I mean, again, I was being pretty slim throughout the column. And yeah, I just decided across the board not to support increased operating costs. I know it's a need for everybody, but it's impossible for us to support that for everybody.
I'm 100% willing to kind of take this away or put it into the commissioner contingency fund. I think what I did find compelling is that they laid out some specific, like the case management piece and some other kind of specific pieces, not just a general, we need more money just because. But I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Kelly, that we may want more data before making any of those decisions. And I hear you, Commissioner Reed, that everybody needs more funding. I just found their argument a bit more strategic than others.
Commissioner Portillo, can you break down, you have 25,000. Where was the 10,000? How did you break that out?
Yeah, I want to say that I had this very specific calculation where it was like the case management plus the Westlaw plus this, and it was just I can't justify the full ask, and so some is better than none.
And, something that did jump out in the conversations we had last week with Kansas Holistic Defenders was that they are doing some service in Shawnee County. And that position was grant funded. So that's something I just want us to sort of talk, my guess is that we're paying the overhead cost for that position. And so that just raised my eyebrows a little bit. I wanted to follow up with Sarah about it because I went back and listened. And so I just, we had some discussions about, where we move those dollars. Could some of those dollars, some of the ask there be grant funded, and then some of the dollars go to those things that you're asking for? Could you move them around a little bit? So I think it's an important thing to establish with a new partner, like this is the limits of our funding. To your point, Commissioner Reed, this is what we're specifically funding. And if you expand in any way or see other costs, they're going to have to figure that out. So otherwise they become a county agency pretty quickly.
So do you want, do you want us to hold a number now, or should we just move on and then talk about it later? How do you want to proceed on this one?
I think I'm good with the idea of holding it in that contingency for, a later this year.
And I'm fine holding the number that Commissioner Portillo
Okay.
has there, rather
Okay.
than the full amount.
Okay, that sounds good.
You
to
can make
me.
a note of 25,000 for now and then see kind of where we end up. The next one is the shelter, community shelter. We have a couple
All
different
had
amounts
some
here.
funding, yeah.
This is Commissioner Reed. I'm curious, Commissioner Kelly, that yellow indicates contingency. If you had a specific number, if you were thinking of the full amount, I really do believe that the community shelter has a significant need to increase their staffing model. And I think based on conversations with them earlier this year and then last week, I do want to support this, but I found it a little hard to commit a full 100,000. And it's another one of those examples of a number that's been carried over year to year with an organization that's also had a lot of transition and change in the model. So I want to support them in some better staffing. I think it's an important need for our community. And but yeah, I'm open to other numbers. I see Commissioner Portillo did a little bit more than me. Commissioner Kelly.
So when I put it in the commissioner's budget for right now, I'm holding their full request. That doesn't mean we would give the full request. This actually is less a conversation with LCS and more with the city of Lawrence, because I consider that emergency shelter, that's something that we've both supported. They've been very clear that that's something they are about. And I want to know if this request is all to the county or if there's some to the city. And, reading on Friday about the city's budget situation, I want to hear where they are. I think it's very important that in these partnership relationships, we enter them together. They've been that way, consistently be that way. So that's where I was a little hesitant of putting it in our budget and just wanting to hold back until that city county meeting on Tuesday. So that's just where my thinking was there.
You have anything to add, or would you be comfortable with holding it in that commissioner contingency?
There's no microphone.
I'm
so-
comfortable holding it in the commissioner contingency.
Okay,
Jill's-
let's do that. And we'll go
Motion.
ahead and hold the full amount in the commissioner contingency for now instead of including it.
Commissioners, I was just going to add the amount that we're at now is was an increase. We got to that amount in 2019, I think. And we increased it significantly over what our previous commitments were. And and we increased it in tandem with the city of Lawrence increasing theirs, and also in tandem with the Erica Dvorsky assessment. And to be fair, a lot of the way that assessment was set up, it was difficult for them to achieve that, especially going into a pandemic and now coming out of the pandemic. But the other piece of that part of that conversation to this new amount was that we would see a commensurate increase in outside grants, but also outside fundraising. And I see positive things happening with that board on trying to raise outside funding, and obviously coming out of a pandemic, that's very difficult. But I do think having that conversation with the city of what are our expectations to see them increase the grants that they're applying for, federal, private, all that good stuff, and then private fundraising. I think that's something that we need to continue that conversation as well. I appreciate the conversations about being in tandem with the city. Sarah and I have been talking about that a lot lately, and I know that'll be a conversation tomorrow night. And one thing in particular, I think will be, LCS mentioned wanting to be a partner in the winter shelter. I think we need to have a conversation as an organization. That was something Sarah and I were talking about as well. Is that something that how will the county's funding be used? We need to be aligned with the city on how our dollars are being used. Is the winter shelter a part of that? It's really hard to dissect the operations of that organization and how it aligns with the different programs, particularly with something like a winter shelter.
Thanks, Jill. I appreciate that.
Well, I think that was if they put the whole amount into commissioners, then that's included in that.
Will it go? Okay, we'll talk about where it'll go later.
Yeah, it's all staying in commissioners now. Right?
I wanted to ask about the $12,000. I forgot last week to bring up my question about that. One, do we know where that number came from? Like, is that a representative of what the county kind of quoted would be that amount for support? Okay. Yeah, I guess that helps me. I'm certainly not opposed to it. I think, but I will say I feel to put in our budget money to pay ourselves
Yeah, I don't know that it would.
for helping a partner, even though I understand the uniqueness of their location being right between two county properties that our maintenance is staffing. I'm curious what other commissioners' thoughts are or any staff feedback about that.
So it looks like I'm the only one who included this, and my thought behind this was largely that this feels like a good neighbor thing that was already being done or could be done because of the proximity, and it's just an acknowledgement that like this is additional support that we're providing, and here is a way to put a dollar amount to that additional support, that having the organization kind of organize that for themselves may be a hurdle for them. And so it's like something that would not be that hard for us to organize given the location. So it seemed like an easy way for the county to provide some maintenance support, but also to identify that this is a real tangible thing that we are providing. If others aren't interested in it, then I think that we can like tell the organization, no, you're a separate organization. It does not matter that you're right next door to our public works. You can handle that on your own. That's fine. I just saw it as like it's an easy thing for us to provide, but let's at least acknowledge that we're providing it. If it is not that easy, like Sarah, please tell me these are your public works department.
Well, and actually, this would be maintenance. So this would be folks coming over from the fairgrounds to do this mowing but they're already doing it at the jail. So it is close by. I think that this is based on real estimates, and it also includes snow removal. So based on real estimates provided by our maintenance staff. What I think we would do is maybe not necessarily give the 12,000 to LCS, but give it to maintenance for additional, fuel, those types of things. Sometimes we do contract out for this. So because those are busy times of the year. So to me, this would be, if the commission funded it, it'd be $12,000 for maintenance.
So I will admit, I was in on this early, and then my thinking has shifted a little bit on this in thinking about like, is this Pandora's box, so that every organization that we're next to says, oh, you're right here. Can you just come over and there's a cost to that. And I worry also about just that would be an ongoing cost that will be part of our overall maintenance, our overall budget as a county year after year after year, and those costs will go up. I think that's less compelling, that part of the argument. But the bigger part of my concern is are we opening a door that I don't know how down the road we stop that. There's one in here about service for the Douglas County Extension that sort of falls in that same bucket for me, is how many ways can we do this? So that was my concern and why I didn't include it.
I'm totally fine to take it out. I would say the Douglas County Extension one I did not include because that one felt very different because it's them funding services for themselves. This one felt different because it's us funding services that we're providing to a building that's next door. But I hear you, like, given how county infrastructure is laid out, there are lots of organizations that could argue you're close by, you're providing maintenance close by. So if we don't want to go down that road, I totally get it. And I'm happy to have it removed.
I think we just have to be careful. I mean, we could do IT for lots of people, right? And I think we just have to be careful of these things becoming county departments. They're partners.
Okay, so we will
Skip it is what
skip
I'm
the
hearing.
12, and then the
But
full
hold the
amount of the
100.
$100,000 ask will be left in commissioners. I do, before we move kind of off, I want to come back to what funds left in the commissioner's budget mean
Mhm.
and when, at the end of this process, so don't let me forget that. Okay, so the next one would be the health department.
I am very convincible on this one. I will just say that.
Well, this would, I just like, one, I do think this should be a department of the county. And if it were a department of the county, it would be included in market merit. It is not, it is a partner, it is an independent organization. And so I think that the same logic holds of
Mhm.
like tons of partners ask for wage increases. We have 8% inflation. Lots of places should be increasing their wages, but they're a partner agency, not a county department. So I didn't feel like that would make sense for us to fund in this particular instance.
This Commissioner Reed, that's exactly what my thinking was. I had it in there because the pandemic and public health workers in particular is a compelling ask for me, but ultimately deleted it because it's not a county department.
I'm fine taking it off for the very reason we've talked about. We
Okay.
can't fund everyone's wages increased.
Okay, so we'll leave it off for now. Okay, Housing Authority, all three commissioners were supportive of the landlord incentive program funds. Then there is a deduction on O'Connell Children's Shelter.
Can we hold on this one
Yep.
until we get to talk about truancy as a whole? Because I have a very wacky strategy on this.
Then the next one would be Trinity and Home Care.
Yeah, this one, I'm very persuadable. I just think that this is one where, like, you're right, they're an outside agency, so if we're gonna be consistent with our logic, we should not increase this at all. I just found this one really compelling, given how hard it is for folks to maintain employment there, given the low wages. And what I found really compelling about their discussion and their argument was the economic development piece of it, of the workers that they're funding are actually some of our most vulnerable people. And they're trying to do lots of things to be good employers, like their paycheck loan program, which keeps people from taking high interest payday loans. And that's like, we know that those are cycles of poverty that affect our whole community then. So I found it compelling from an economic development standpoint. And I thought the economic development argument, they hit it really well. I think they could have hit it even harder. So I wanted to throw some funding at it. But I recognize that it is logically inconsistent with our not wanting to raise wages for external agencies. They just made a better argument than everyone else with the economic development piece. And I think that if we were to really take a look at like ROI on economic development from a county perspective, I think this would be higher than most of our other partner agencies, but I don't think that we could have the data to truly support that. It's just things that I think would be true given the vulnerable population they're working with.
Yeah, this Commissioner Reed, I agree. And this was a hard one for me to delete, and it was because of that consistency and logic, but I would agree that it was a really compelling ask, and it does the workforce development and economic development piece of it, I think, is pretty unique. So Trinity and Home Care is something I'm worried about our community losing. And so I want them to have strong local investments and support. But a little worried about the ongoing increases and whether or not that's going to do the job, I guess. So get, I think that, yeah, the amount also, I wondered like, how far will that amount go? Ultimately was a little bit of hesitation I had. So that this one was hard for me because I found their narrative very compelling and appreciate how thoughtful they are about their employees and the way that they employ them, considering the extremely low wages and precarious financial situation that they are in because of the type of work that they do. And as has been already highlighted, the lack of Medicaid expansion in our state.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit on lack of Medicaid expansion yet again. We had the dollars to pay for it. It covers 90% from federal funds. We took federal ARPA funds. I'm not quite sure why we can't take Medicaid funds. So, and it has impacts on local communities. I'm a huge fan of Trinity. I think what they do from an economic development standpoint, I agree with you 100% for the care that they provide for both seniors and those with developmental disabilities. They do fantastic work. We have increased their amount multiple years here. And I think if we don't put a pause on it, they also got an increase in the reimbursement rate. For me, if we don't put a pause on it, we're setting ourselves up for every year increasing this. Because I just don't see, I don't have a good solution for this. This is one of those, I can recognize the problem, but I don't have a good solution for how we pay certified nurse aides a living wage to do this work. It's just really challenging. So, but I could see that in a lot of different spaces across our community partners.
This Commissioner Reed, I think we should probably skip this and not include it to be consistent.
So the next one would be Center for Supportive Communities. And we've got two commissioners with two different amounts of support here. And I don't know if this is where you want to talk about O'Connell as well. Or go ahead.
I would just wanted to note, I am supportive of this. I didn't include it just because I have a note about wanting to set it aside, but I just wasn't really sure. Thought it'd be a part of a larger conversation today. So I decided just to not include it at the moment and decide how we want to hold that and move forward.
So I'm really excited about the truancy conversation and the impacts it will have, maybe not in the next 2 to 3 years, but down the line, many years from now on our criminal justice and our jail numbers. I do believe that makes a difference. I also think it's economic development, Commissioner Portillo, as we keep kids in school and get them on track. So I did a little bit of weird math here and I'll walk you through it. I did take Dr. Dockman, thank you. I did take her point very seriously. Like if we don't show some funding here, this is a new new nonprofit that is in place of something that we've had for quite some time. I mean, it would be easy to say, well, welcome to the world of being a nonprofit, but this is something we've had and we're trying. So I put some dollars directly there so they can start up confidently. Then I took 50,000, they asked for 150,000 and I moved that to the commissioner budget from their request. There was a $30,000 request from O'Connell for additional services and I moved that to the commissioners. That's where you see that 20,000 being reduced as well from there. So so each group got $50,000 less than what they asked. I told you this is weird math, Sarah. I'm watching your
Yeah,
face.
I'm not sure. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, stay with me. And then I actually put a few more dollars in there because I think there's some potentials here in my email. Yeah.
So what's the total you want to put aside towards truancy?
So there would be 100,000 for CSC. Then we would take 20,000 from the O'Connell budget and we would take their 30,000 that they requested. I didn't put that in either. And then I added another 50,000. That is a random number, but I think my experience has been when you try to work with partners, one of the best motivators is those dollars. And so as we think about our truancy services, bringing them to the table and saying, here, this is a way that we have some dollars we put aside for truancy. We want to make sure you're working in this space because school starts in a few weeks. But also we want to keep talking about it. So it's probably way more complicated than it needs to be, but that was sort of what I was playing.
So it sounds like bottom line, you want to fund $200,000 worth of truancy across CSC and O'Connell.
I think O'Connell's number is a little higher. I think they were at 208 in their budget.
But that's includes all the things.
All
Yeah,
the
that's
things,
not
yeah.
just-
That includes case
truancy,
management
yeah.
and the crisis beds.
Well, and so,
I can't get a breakdown.
yeah, and I think that
That's
this is.
part of the problem. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess this is the big issue with working with community partners rather than having services directly provided by the county. That we're relying on community partners to give us budget breakdowns, and O'Connell has been unable to do that. So I think where I am hesitant to go with this plan, I hear what you're saying, and I recognize that the goal is to get community partners to come to the table, continue to have conversations, to work together and to achieve this goal. And I think that we're all in agreement, like, that's what we want to do. I think where I'm a little hesitant with this plan is that CSC is a brand new organization that clearly needs some dedicated funding to get started. This is another one that was a huge cost transfer because the University of Kansas used to pay for this, and now the county's having to pay for this. So we're getting cost transfers from the city, the state, and the University of Kansas. I could be persuaded to say, let's put some in the commissioner's budget. I think we're really relying on that in these conversations where it's going to be how do we keep all these conversations moving forward and get organizations the funding that they need. I am also really concerned with another point that you kind of made at the end, that school starts next month and we need to make sure that these services are contiguous. And I think that part of that is, for right now, O'Connell continuing with high school and CSC taking K-8. Long-term, we may not want that to be the case, but is that something that we can solve in the 2023 budget? I'm not convinced that we're there yet. So I'm down with moving some stuff around. I just want to make sure that we're committing enough to CSC so that they exist. And we're continuing to pressure O'Connell to give us like legitimate accounting numbers, because I think that that's right now, they're not a partner that I am proud of because we cannot say exactly where our funding is going.
This Commissioner Reed. Commissioner Kelly, I want to clarify, was your thought that we would dedicate 100,000 now to CSC and get them that funding, and that anything else would be held in the commissioner contingency, but
Yeah.
100,000 now?
Yes, and I recognize that budget doesn't start till January, which
Uh-huh.
is halfway through their work year. And so I think it would be good for us to it seemed to be at our hearing that they felt like they had some dollars to make that work. I mean, they're brand new. I don't know. Maybe they have grant dollars that she said they had some grant. money.
Well, so CJS had funds, so it has 18,000, right, Pam? 15 to 18.
Yeah, there's 15,000.
You have to turn on the microphone. Yeah, there you go.
Just kind of follow technology. This is Pam Weegan with Criminal Justice Services. So we have KDOC funds for 2023, which we're currently in that grant cycle. The grants at DOC run from July 1st to June 30th, which means they would have access to about 7,500 of that. And then we had set aside usually about 3,000 in CJS funds to kind of supplement.
So like
What we used to
10,000.
supplement was the graduate teaching assistant. But I'm assuming they're going to need some additional funding to operate this quarter, this semester,
But there was around 10,000 that you kind of, so if you said 750,
roughly.
it's
Yeah, about
10,000.
10,000.
And part of my point of putting money in there is I thought their presentation was very good. They've been a partner, not exactly the same partner, but they've been a partner so far. I want to work with CSC. I'm very excited about what they're doing. they are using best practices. Those are research-based best practices, the way they're doing their work. I want to work with them, but I want to be clear. I want to make sure that we are holding both partners, O'Connell and CSC, towards some similar outcomes and data that as we work on that agreement. And I think that's going to take some time. I still feel like there are partners that haven't been engaged in, I mean, the letters of support were great, but how we report data, where that data comes from, what the expectation of response time is, what the courts expect. And I think these two partners could do some really amazing work in this space, and want to sort of hold that there. My 100,000 is to make sure that, I hope that's enough to make sure that they understand we want to work with this community.
I think I'm less concerned about the 100,000 for CSC and more concerned about if there's additional funds you want to set aside and where you want those to come from. I guess I would say, as opposed to the $30,000 of the request of O'Connell, which was not funded and was not all for truancy, just tell me the amount you want to set aside out of the commissioner's budget to also fund truancy work this year and next.
One piece of Commissioner Kelly's proposal that I find compelling is, do we want to reduce some amount from O'Connell to like make that set aside possible? And I am okay with that. But yes, we need to come up with what exactly does that number look like?
So what if we did 100,000 for CSC, you know? If I recall, neither Commissioner Portillo or I supported the $30,000 supplemental request from O'Connell either. So no one did, yeah. And you had the another less than 20,000. I wonder, and I would support shaving some money from their budget. So if we did 100,000 for CSC now, and yeah, I mean, to your point, Commissioner Portillo, the number for set aside, I wonder if, and I was trying to redo the math from your original formula, Commissioner Kelly, if we do another $100,000 set aside, or just 50,000 for more conversation. I think part of what my note was that, and we discussed it a little bit during the hearing last week, is how can we help convene a work group to really, so that by next year's budget cycle, got a much clearer picture of that whole system and all of the players. But what I don't want to do is create a gap in services and make the problem bigger.
I think that if the commissioners want to do a reduction of $20,000 from O'Connell's budget in reflection of, and in essence, moving those funds to the commissioner's budget to be a part of conversations about truancy, to me, it's $100,000 for CSC, a $20,000 reallocation from O'Connell to the commissioner's budget to join another 80, so that there's $100,000 in the commissioner's budget for truancy support.
Yeah, and I just want to add that I want to, we're talking about truancy, but part of the conversation I want to have with O'Connell is about crisis beds as well.
Yeah.
And so that was part of that 20,000 is, you know, DCCA has some ability to do, we just need more clarity on youth crisis beds and how we're going to pay for those.
Are we comfortable with that sort of plus 100 minus, or reallocating 20 to join another 80 in the commissioner's budget for now, or is that too high?
Well, if part of the conversation that we're having is not just truancy, but also crisis beds, I'm wondering if we should reallocate more than just the 20 that Commissioner Kelly has suggested and reduce O'Connell's budget, put more of that into the commissioner budget so that we can have that conversation.
I don't
about
mind that.
beds.
I'm just, as we've talked about with O'Connell before, I'm having a hard time figuring out what that number is.
And I don't know if we have a good guesstimate, any guesstimate.
I mean, I think you could do 20 or 50, and then honestly, in these dollar amounts, we can make a lot of that stuff work for that conversation. I mean, the total count O'Connell allocations, $275,000. It's a $50,000 reallocation that's not lost to them until we have a further conversation is to me, something we can definitely discuss.
I would feel more comfortable reducing their allocation by 50, putting that in the commissioner budget as a way to really ensure that we're working towards more accountability with how our funds are being spent there.
This
and
Commissioner Reed.
Compelling those conversations about both emergency beds and truancy.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I think that $50,000 is a bit more compelling for that reason and helps create a substantial amount for us to figure out a better plan for moving forward. Commissioner Kelly, so $50,000 reduction sound okay?
Yeah.
So $100,000 to CSC now. And then
$50,000 reallocation from
okay.
from O'Connell, and then another fresh 50 that's in the commissioner's budget to help for truancy. Okay,
Yep.
I think we've got that.
And then the tenants to homeowners, you all are
Okay.
listed in favor of that.
So we include that, and then I
I'd
would
like
suggest
to
we
come back
come
the
back
mill
to
levy
mill levy.
reduction.
Yeah.
Feel like it's in of this
So the
discussion.
next one would be district court operations.
So this Commissioner Reed here, I am very supportive of this. My note, again, the reason I didn't include it was because I was thinking of it as set aside. I- Go ahead.
So I started on this by just saying, what's one step we could do? Because I'm supportive of the concept. I wondered if we wanted to do kiosk, but then because that kiosk was in there as well. But is that a big enough step to make a difference? I don't know. I just wanted to take you through some of my thinking because was hesitant on this one. And then I thought, well, this seems like a service and it happens in other counties. That it was compelling to me.
I will say, I think it will be a success. I think somebody who works in the courts and this has been a need in our community for a long time. One thought I had, and I think is reflected in my note column, is that I wondered if we just start with the attorney, the self-help director, because what I heard from our hearing was that there's still, I think the way Linda phrased it even was that the work group that is representative of a whole bunch of departments and folks throughout the court, and I was really impressed with the work they did to get there, but that they've kind of gotten as far as they can with their research, and that to bring on an attorney as a legal director, I think, to me, my impression was that that would help really kind of form the full plan and vision for what it will look like and prioritizing those needs. So one thought I had was we fund basically a director and bring a director on that could help contribute to a little bit more intentional formation and decisions about other staff that's needed, as well as what those partnerships with the other legal services look like. On that chart that kind of listed Kansas Legal Services, Douglas County Legal Aid, those other partners that they may tap into as resources for having, for example, clinic students in the self-help center to help with some of those things. I'm interested in, I guess, seeing a little bit more of a fully formed plan before just putting two staff in, but I'm open. That was just a rationale that I had while rereading their packet.
I agree with you, Commissioner Reed, that I think the most important part is getting that legal director on board started so that there can be some intentionality with how do we move it forward. So if that's how we want to structure the funding, as long as we're moving it forward with that piece of it, I'm good.
Yeah, and Commissioner Reed, you probably interact with the courts more than any of us, so I really appreciate your perspective on that. And I'm, like I said, I put kiosk down first and then went, that doesn't seem strong enough. So I'm fine with that suggestion.
And I'm still holding some internal ARPA funds for one-time costs. So the kiosks to me and some of those, laptops and desks and so forth, I was thinking I would fund through ARPA internal projects. So I think we could do the director and then those costs from ARPA. Kimmy, can you make a note? I want to go back and revisit because the court trustee position that's unfunded, we just need to figure out what's happening with that one. I don't want to lose access to that resource. So, but I think that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for mentioning the ARPA request, because I did wonder if between the kiosk and then just other technology needs to get that, to stand that office up, that some of those one-time dollars
Yeah.
could be helpful and that there might be enough of them in that internal
Oh, yeah.
budget. Thanks.
So the next one would be the BT.
BTBC.
I
formerly
just sort of wanted to
BTBC.
see where commissioners were on this one and the one on small business development as well, because what we heard was these are business development services. I didn't hear a whole lot about how that would impact. I mean, the question was asked specifically, like, how would this cut impact? And when I was on the Innovation Park Board, I couldn't. I think they've had that funding. It's good for leverage with other funds. We still have that funding in place. But I just wanted to hear maybe a little bit more, but I am interested in whether the commissioners want to say that.
So I currently serve on that board and I have diligently asked every single time exactly how that funding is used, what that leverage looks like, what impact has happened since we decreased that funding a bit, and what their long-term plans are as they continue to expand and their budget has exploded. How they plan on kind of adjusting what resources they need, input from local governments and that sort of thing. I have never gotten a clearer straight answer. It's been very clear that our reduction in funding does not in any way impede their growth and the expansion and the job creation that they see as their core function. What I have heard is that our funding has been set aside to do some of the small business development. I will say I'm pretty disappointed that in our community as a whole, we have so many small pockets of small business development. And there isn't a clear answer of where someone goes when they need access. We did and we are funding the mapping of the economic ecosystem mapping that Jill put a request in for. And so I think that will help. But what this funding seems like is, oh, well, you've always given us this money, keep giving us this money. And there's no accounting for how the growth of like what was initially an investment by Douglas County, that investment has paid off. Like we're seeing job growth, we're seeing expansion in the park, we're seeing increased revenue coming into the park, but we're still being asked to invest at the same rate. And I have not gotten a straight or compelling answer as to why that is. So I would be very against giving them this supplemental 50,000. It does look like we all are in agreement in the increase of 10,000 for EDC when it comes to startup funds. And I think that's important. Again, the kind of startup revolving grant funds, I have too many questions to kind of move forward with that funding at this time.
This is Commissioner Reed. I very supportive of that $10,000 increase because I know that they I believe that the KU Small Business Development Center really makes those dollars stretch and does a lot with them. Similarly to Commissioner Portillo, I don't think that anything was presented both in certainly not the narrative nor in our hearing that compelled me to believe that the $50,000 reduction we gave to an organization that has a growing amount of assets and a growing budget. There's just no compelling reason to restore it. It doesn't sound like they've lost out on anything because of it. And if they have, it hasn't been articulated to us. And then for the revolving loan, I really like this idea and find it intriguing. But like Commissioner Portillo said, still have a lot of questions about it. And I think, frankly, I'm in a space of, I'm interested to see it started up and functioning. And I heard the chamber say that they're moving forward with it and they're funding it through their Rising Together campaign. Regardless, obviously, they're looking to make that a much bigger startup and seeking funds from both the city and county. But I'm just not there yet. I think that I would be supportive of it in the future, but it didn't find it compelling enough for right now.
So I think we're all in agreement on the small business development, and with that, I'm okay taking that 50,000 out. The reason you see the highlight there on the loan fund is that sounds like a one-time cost to me. I may not be understanding. I feel like I don't understand it yet, but it feels like a one-time cost to me. And it seemed like maybe something we could take out of fund balance to get it started. You know, I just tossed that out as an idea to see where commissioners feel on that.
So for that one, I have some questions as to how one-time it is, because I think it's a one-time cost if everything goes exactly to plan, everything really functions as a revolving fund. I have some hesitancy to believe it's as truly one-time as it's presented to us. But in addition to that, I think that this was part of the Rising Together campaign that the chamber put forward, that they completed their fundraising and exceeded their fundraising goals. And so this is one where I think this is a compelling thing for our community to do. I don't know that it's compelling for the county to fund. And so given kind of our budget and overall, what are the best uses of public dollars? I think that there are private dollars to support this important need. And I don't feel compelled to add public dollars to that coffer.
Well, and you know, even if it's one-time funds and we can look at that down the line, it doesn't need to be today that we look at that because it wouldn't be a budget and ongoing cost. So I'm fine not including it. I just share that as an idea. I agree that there are, you know, Rising Together may create those. I want to hear how those are all working together, because I don't think this 200,000 was all that was there. And I don't know if it's Commissioner Portillo's point, if it's, you know, how are the cities participating as well? Like if this is standing on that three-legged stool of grants, government and public and, you know, private dollars, let's hear where all those stool legs are.
Well, and I think we need to be clear that that three-legged stool is not just for individual programs. Like we are still investing heavily in the EDC and in not just the Lawrence Chamber, but the Eudora Chamber and the Baldwin Chamber. So like we're still investing heavily in economic development as part of that three-legged stool. I just haven't seen enough saying that we need to invest in this aspect of it in the budget. But I agree that if it's meant to be one time, then it doesn't need to be part of our budget deliberations.
Okay, I think we can move on. Emergency management, there was some,
Confusion on the
yeah,
spreadsheet.
it is built in. So it is built in it, but the spreadsheet it wasn't labeled red. So that's
So-
why you guys didn't see it,
Right.
but it is built in.
So
so-
there's
So you
no-
highlighted those, but
I
I'm like, did I
highlighted it.
highlight that?
Well,
No.
Portillo and Reed
Okay.
asked for it to be put in.
And then
And
we were like,
it was
"Okay."
actually already included, but the spreadsheet was marked as though it wasn't.
That's what I was confused by, because I was
Yep.
like, I'm pretty sure we said that we won all that.
Right.
Yeah, we cleared that up last night. So.
Yeah. after we- Okay, so the next one would be $10,000 for heritage conservation grants. This is a
So I was the only one to put this in, and I will say, like, I didn't fund any of their our historical society requests down the line. And this is so just, you know, when we set that number for HCC, I thought probably costs have increased since there. 10,000 seemed like a reasonable number to me to increase that and seemed in some way. I do like the way we do that with giving money to a part of the county that then looks at grants. I like that a whole lot better than all of our community partners from the historical societies coming in and asking for money every year. So, you know, I can be convinced on it, but that was my thinking behind it.
Commissioner Reed, well, I was gonna say, I'm very movable on this too. I'm supportive of it. I think ultimately it wasn't particularly compelling in the totality of all the supplemental requests we have. I also had the thought that I think I was a little worried that $10,000 isn't gonna be felt much, but maybe it helps account just for those increased costs. So, but I agree with Commissioner Kelly that I like that model of having a county department that is assessing and allocating grant dollars. So I do have some interest in standing that up to be really successful, and maybe we do need an update to the amount. I think $10,000 more than what we have been giving. I just wasn't sure how much of a dent that would make, I guess.
I'm persuaded. Let's put that $10,000.
Okay, let's do it.
It looks like you all agreed for the cook position for the jail.
The next
Um,
one would be, yeah, the six
Corrections
correctional
officers, it looks like 2 commissioners put in for 3.
So this is one where I found the sheriff's argument really compelling about needs within the jail because of our strategy that we only want people who really need to be detained, and those are often higher need individuals. And so I think that there's a really compelling argument for additional corrections officers. I am really happy that our sheriff is so great at collecting data and sharing data. I think that the dashboards have been fantastic. We did ask for one additional piece of data, which is waiting on learned admittance, because I think that's another cost that the state is putting on the county that is unfunded from local governments because we don't have the resources that the state is statutorily required to provide. And so I'd like to see kind of how we can at least track that and hopefully compel the state to invest more in mental health services. I didn't see the need to fund all of the positions. I do think that with half the positions, hopefully that can make a dent in it. I didn't fund any of the patrol positions, and I think that a big piece of that is, again, this is one where the state has quit keeping highway patrol officers because our sheriff's department is taking on more than they are statutorily required to do. And I would like us to ask the highway patrol to do better and put folks back in our area, because this is another cost transfer from the state to the county, and I would like to not fund that.
I had similar thinking to you on the corrections officers. I think on the patrol officers, I struggled maybe a little bit with how much we're responding in other communities, because that was the other thing we heard, and I'm hoping that the sheriff can keep better data. He said I think he had data, but he just didn't provide it to us on how often we're responding in other communities, because that's a cost we shouldn't be taking on. There, and I can be convinced off of this one. One of the things that it seems to me is we're seeing a much higher increase in accidents, especially dangerous accidents on our county roads. And my thinking is that must be partially of enforcement. And so maybe it's not, maybe it's just better press coverage, but that was something that leaned me towards that ask.
So one additional thing that I found compelling about their discussion, and I think that this is a really great kind of management decision by our sheriff's office, that everyone starts as a corrections officer before going to patrol, which means that patrol officers are regularly then used as support for corrections. If we increase the number of corrections officers, we can decrease the number of patrol officers who are being pulled into the jail to serve as backup for corrections officers. So that was another reason why I thought that the investment in corrections officers made more sense than investment in patrol officers. And I think we are fine as long as we make investments in corrections officers. I could be persuaded. I hear what you're saying. There are more dangerous accidents on county roads, those not just highways that highway patrol would need to take. So I could be compelled to increase, not by the full ask, but 1 or 2 patrol officers. But I think ultimately we may have a better investment if we increase the number of corrections officers to offset patrol officers being pulled into the jail.
This Commissioner Reed, I'm convinced of the need for some funds for corrections officers for all the reasons that have been stated by fellow commissioners. And I think, well, and to Commissioner Portillo's point, the fact that everybody starts off as corrections, and so that increase in capacity does have a department-wide impact. I struggle to support the additional patrol deputies right now for the reasons that have been stated, both that I think we need to have a conversation about yet again, an example of a gap in services at the state, increasing financial pressure for us at the local level. And would really like to figure out how we can support the sheriff in conversations with Kansas Highway Patrol about that, because I don't, I'm just not comfortable with supplementing that lack of historical support and statutory responsibility of that law enforcement jurisdiction. But I certainly appreciate the need for increased corrections officers, given the way that the landscape of the jail has shifted over the years. So it looks like both of you funded, is that half of so 3 full-time? So I'm good with that number. I'm not completely opposed to the patrol deputies. I just struggle with that one. Also for the reason that Commissioner Kelly pointed out, the amount of co-responding and mutual aid support to other law enforcement agencies has me a little bit concerned. And I appreciate that is how most first responders function. You know, mutual aid calls happen all the time between our rural fire departments, with other counties as well. But for that to just be the nice and right thing to do with no sort of structure around it concerns me.
What if we just funded one of there are different pay levels, are they not, Sarah, between corrections and
Yeah.
patrol?
Yeah.
That might give the sheriff a little more wiggle room.
I would be fine with that.
Works for me.
So one
4.
deputy.
1 patrol deputy, yeah.
Okay, let us look that up.
Just divide the
I'm just gonna divide. by 4.
316, 415 by 4.
There you go.
Okay. The next one would be the treasurer's office.
I'll jump in on that since I can totally be persuaded to include this. I think what I heard was that, you know, we obviously aren't sure what the lease amount will be yet. I really support the funding of a new office space, but wonder if next year's budget cycle is the time to put in a lease amount. But I'm okay with holding this if it feels important to other commissioners and then adjusting that number as we need to in the future.
I'd look to Sarah for that. I mean, where that lease starts is a little time-wise to me. That's what I was trying to figure out. Like, I'm supportive of them having a better office when things downstairs are a little crazy sometimes, not
Yeah.
always, but sometimes, and it seems like the right thing to do. When to put that in the budget, and that it's an ongoing cost. So when if we're moving there in 23, we're gonna need some dollars to cover that.
I'd take the authority now if commissioners are interested, but you're right, this is not a firm number. But they are paying some, so this would be in addition to that, which I think should get them closer to the ballpark. But, you know, for example, the elections office, an office of that size the annual ongoing rent is around $100,000.
Hmm.
So this may not be enough, but at least gets us part of the way. So
Okay,
we
I'm
can
good with
include it.
including it.
Okay. So then we go down to LDCFM and the ambulances. It looks like all the commissioners reduced the funding for the ambulance. And then the CIP for the expansion, but then we have some funds, then the station alerting is 374,400, correct, Cami? So we have had some conversations with the city. The city did not include the expansion in the city manager's proposed budget, but I do believe they did include station alerting of the 374,400.
I'm fine putting that back as long as it's being matched in the city budget.
It is right now.
It is as it stands currently.
Same.
So we don't actually have to
Nope, I
add
don't have
it.
to do anything.
Yeah, because it's
I'm
in
gonna-
for us, but you have to delete the 450 and the 360.
I noticed that we all included the mobile integrated health, which
Yeah.
I'm excited about, and I really feel like we need to move forward on that. And I'm hopeful that over in time will help us see some improvement in some of those response times and help lessen the burden a little bit. I do want to say, I still have concerns about it being considered 100% county. So I just want to be clear in this conversation today about the fact that that could be revisited in the future in terms of the cost share. Is that accurate, Sarah? But or I'm curious what other commissioners think about that. I just don't believe that it's appropriate for it to be 100% county, but I don't want to slow the progress on it because I do think it's an important addition.
I 100% believe that this should be part of our shared costs because I think this is a benefit to the overall community. There are a number of municipalities, cities that fund this exclusively on the fire side. So there are lots of places that don't even, ask for county money. I don't think that we are in a budget environment where that ask is going to be matched by our city partners. And I think it is a compelling enough ask that we should put it in, even if we're bearing the full brunt of it. But I think that we already saw a huge cost transfer from the city to the county in fire medical last year. I think that this is a continuation of the city not having the funds to do the things that are really important to our community, but us doing things that are important to our community. So I agree with you. It should be in the cost share. I think that we should continue to push our city partners to do that. I don't think that that's going to be a winning strategy in the 2023 budget. And I think it is important enough to me that we go ahead and fund it, but it's something we should continue to ask about whenever we can, maybe even tomorrow evening.
Here on that it needs to be a shared cost. And understanding the city's budget situation right now. I actually will take a little bit of a different take. I want to see my understanding from the two study session, well, the conversation we had with LDCFM and then the study session prior was this should reduce our overall cost. What I want to see is where are we putting the dollars for that reduced overall cost? Some of the other positions they asked for, I didn't entertain because I want to like, well, I think you could move your budget around then, right? And if it is a reduced overall cost, it should be a reduced overall cost for both sides, right? So we're not sending as many people out on these calls. We're also funding Project Lively, which we think will reduce the number of calls as well. So I'm just really interested. We're doing lots of interventions here that are supposed to save us money in the large picture. And I'm not seeing those dollars saved in the large picture. We just see continual asks over and over again. This seems to be especially true with LDCFM. I'm just not seeing where that's coming. The other thing is I'm not really interested in renegotiating a contract that was a lot of work to get to in the first year of it. And so I think it's okay to have this there for now. And then, I can't remember when we said we'd revisit. Did we set a regular?
Well, we talk about it the whole contract's looked at every 5.
Yeah.
But we meet governance quarterly.
Yeah, we meet regularly about it, but I don't want to totally throw off our new contract. So
Right.
that was also compelling to me on the first two that none of us funded was I don't want to redo the percentage right now. I get it. So
The last thing we have is to talk about the logistics position.
I included this because I think we listening to LDCFM, we supply a lot of materials all over the place. I can be convinced off of it. I just want to make sure that this does seem to be specifically around EMS. And it's tricky to do and have enough support to do it. We've heard this a couple of years now that it's been very hard to get. I also think this is a great opportunity to partner with our other fire departments here and look at some opportunities there. So I can be convinced off of this, but I did include it.
I could be convinced to fund this specifically for the arguments that Commissioner Kelly put forward, in particular, how our fire department collaborates with other fire departments. We saw a lot about kind of time to response, and I think that I would like to see how we can better integrate Consolidated Fire District 1's timing and their data. So if you're going to fund this logistics position, I'd like to see it funded with kind of a direct expectation of more collaboration and data sharing between our volunteer departments in the unincorporated areas and LDCFM.
This Commissioner Reed, I can also be, I'm okay with including this. I had initially included it and it was one of the things that I took out before sending this. So I think that there is some need for it. And hearing that the division chief was a department of one was interesting to understand kind of how they're structured, but think that that support is valid. So I'm okay with including this one.
And some of these costs are one time. I mean, we can program in the whole amount, but I think in future years, there's a vehicle in this cost.
Okay.
So
yeah,
like in a
thank you.
future year, this
So
will
it would
drop
be
down.
Okay.
I just
I
don't
think
want.
it's 50, but that's just off. the
Yeah,
top of
and
my
that's
head.
the same thing with the mobile
MIH.
integrated health, right? So then it'll be two salaries moving forward.
Right. So this full amount won't carry forward next year. Okay. So
What, do you have a question, Commissioner Kelly?
Well, I mean, if we know the salaries and we know the cost of the vehicles, can we pull that out now? I mean, because this is setting that mill levy.
yeah, and you mean hit one-time cost for the
Other
vehicle,
two.
the vehicles?
Yeah, we can.
Just,
We can. It's whatever way.
Well,
it's-
And on this spreadsheet, I would just show that by offsetting it from the non-appropriated line, which would change your fund balance. Is that-
We just need to go do the math, find out which pieces are are associated with the capital.
Certainly.
Yeah, I would support that if there's a way to pay for the one-time costs. and
Okay.
Bring that mill down a bit.
So at this rate, if, going by what we have here, the adjusted mills at 47,699. I don't know if commissioners want to go back up and have conversations about the
I have-
funding that outlines in the mill levy reduction amount.
I
I
think
will
we,
tell you, I have reserves so far with this discussion right here of 225 that need to stay, $225,000 that needs to stay in commissioner contingency for the
Other things. you're talking
truancy
about.
discussion, warrants, community shelter and KHD.
I'd like to discuss our commissioner contingency because I think that is well above the 225 that we've set aside for
Yes.
those things. So I think we can reduce that line a bit.
Yeah.
And I would like to discuss the mill levy reduction because I think that that's
Yep.
there's, yeah.
Yeah, I am all for, I like your bigger numbers, Commissioner Kelly and Commissioner Portillo here. I feel this is one that I kind of waffled on and I just did not know what to pick and thought that our conversations would be much more enlightening. So I kind of just let it go and tried to stop figuring out the right number, but certainly we have plenty of room there. So yeah, just make that note since my amount is so much lower.
Yeah, so we have to keep 225,000 in there based on our discussions. I think it would make sense to have a buffer of maybe that same amount. If we got that number to 500,000, I think that would be plenty.
can I recommend maybe we take a little bit of a break? Let Cammy do some math real quick and then we come back and she can sort of tell us where we're
Love the
at.
plan.
Would that be okay?
Love it.
Live math is never fun.
You mean sharing an Excel spreadsheet on YouTube isn't fun?
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, we've done some quick math here too, and we can kind of walk you through the changes. So on line 64 there of the commissioner's budget, that total budget included funds available for mill levy reduction and or program expansion. So it wasn't the full 3 million. There's other things on that budget. But when we looked at the detail, we subtracted that amount that was set aside. You can bring it in, Robin, if you want. By the funds that we need to retain for the projects the commission wants to continue to explore. So that includes, and Cami will nod at me, it includes $100,000 for additional truancy conversations. You'll notice that there's an offset of $50,000 reduction to O'Connell. Then there is $100,000 for LCS and $25,000 for set aside funds related to KHD. I want folks that are listening to these conversations to know that those funds are set aside, but they're not, we got a lot of work to do in these areas. And so I don't want, I don't want folks to necessarily feel like those funds are automatically going to be given to them without additional conversation for all three groups as to how the commissioners want to send. They just want to reserve some authority to continue to work on these issues. Is that a fair statement on those?
That sounds right to me, Sarah.
Okay,
And Sarah, you'd think we'd have those conversations before January when the budget
Absolutely.
year starts, right?
yes, absolutely. So minus that amount, this would, if that entire amount was then reduced, it would, you can see at the top there on row 6, what, and when row 1, what the reduction to the mill levy would be. Of 1.158 mils.
I think that's a great mill levy reduction rate.
Me too. That's better than I expected. So I like it.
Yeah, I think I feel that we're trying to be responsive to the increases we've seen in assessed evaluation. At the same time, we've heard from our community, we're not out of the pandemic yet and the impacts of the pandemic. And so I feel fortunate we can provide some relief from the burden of taxes and at the same time balance that with making sure we have the services that are needed in our community.
What I generally like to do at this point is have us go back and check all the math, what commissioners think, send a copy of this spreadsheet back to commissioners for you to continue to sort of just make sure you're where you want to be. And then come back if there are, if there are any changes, we would still have a little time to make them. And just if there's an adjustment on our part. Our problem is, when do we want to do that by? Are there any questions? I feel pretty confident just how we put the budget together that we're pretty close. There might be a little something here or there that we find and clean up, but I'm pretty comfortable that this is where we're going to end up being.
Okay, so how do you see that affecting our current calendar? Because we're scheduled to meet tomorrow, but I'm not sure that that gives you enough time to really do.
Right. And then we canceled the meeting Wednesday. Normally I'd say, well, we'll have this to you before Wednesday if you have any questions, but we canceled the meeting Wednesday.
I mean, could we talk about this next Wednesday?
You
still
could the
keeps us
20th.
Very much on.
Yeah,
track.
so I
Okay.
would say we can email this to you and I would just say, we will proceed with this moving towards this as an adopted budget. But commissioners, on the 20th, when we meet, if there are any changes or issues or questions, we would still have time to make adjustments at that point before publication and before public hearings on the budget and before, and just as that would be we've already, as we've discussed with commissioners, we will be exceeding our revenue neutral rate. So we will go ahead and proceed for that work and those notifications, which I think was around the 20th, wasn't it? Yeah, so, but I don't think that's not a burden at this point.
This Commissioner Reed, I like that plan. I do think we have one decision point left back at the top of the spreadsheet for the HSC dollars. We just need to land on a
Oopsies.
total amount for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
It was feeling too easy, huh? Like we were
yeah.
just
Well, I'm
breezing
glad
on
we caught
by.
it now.
So maybe I'd recommend just looking at maybe that 225 number that Commissioner Reed was on. I don't know that we really have a good way of figuring out this number.
We don't, and I would just say, you know, my hope here was to set aside some funds towards sustainability. It's important for the community to understand that we, you know, don't have much built in for this, so. But I think this buys us some time to continue to see how the impact of losing Kara and then our one-time dollars, how we can really build a program and what that looks like. So I think this, I'm comfortable with that amount and us being able to adjust it in the future if it were to stay at 225.
Yeah, that 225 amount also keeps our mill levy reduction above 1.
Yeah.
Just barely above 1.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner
Okay,
Reed,
so
for
then you,
catching that.
right, let's give us a minute here to
Mhm.
work the math. It was, you just went past it. Hmm.
While Cammie's doing more live
Take a little
mathing
breath.
for us, I would just want to appreciate how much work staff had put into giving us a really thoughtful and flexible budget. So I feel really proud of some of the investments that we're going to be able to make with the amount of money that we have in our budget for 2023. While, like Commissioner Kelly said, being able to have enough wiggle room to
Oh,
bring down that mill levy and relieve a little bit of pressure as much as possible for folks across the community. So I just appreciate staff for that.
So maybe here's where we talk about CIP a little bit. 'Cause I
Okay,
think we have
yeah.
Yeah, so we had a 7% transfer on
remember
CIP.
what that implied.
Traditionally, we've seen about a 5% growth in evaluations. This year as an anomaly. So I hope it's an anomaly.
We only programmed it and we programmed in 7.
And we did 7. And so I had just asked Cammie for a little bit of like what would happen if we went from 7 to 6. And it didn't have a huge impact on the
Right.
mill levy, but it did reduce it. Our total expenditure like 92. Is that right, Cammie?
No,
No,
5%
92
would
is
only
5.
bring it down 92.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, if you went to a 5% increase in the CIP instead of a 7% increase, it would be a $92,425 reduction.
Can we see what it is for a 6%?
Is a
46. Can we see how that hits the mill
Mhm.
levy?
Yep. It's not what you want.
Just shy.
Our,
Do you,
but we could put it.
you want
the
6.5 or 5.5?
I mean,
And it's fine.
one, I'm okay with sticking with a 5% because that is our historical trend. And I don't think that we're, like,
do
we
that.
were being very conservative with
92.
7. The other piece is that our reserves are looking very healthy and I would be okay with reducing the reserve amount just a bit.
Yeah.
But either way, CIP or reserves, I think that that gets us back to that 1 mil reduction, which is really a good goal.
I'd feel better about taking it out, doing 5% on CIP, just because it's so hard to remember from year to year on fund balance for those issues. How does that look if we do move CIP back to a 5% growth?
That works for me. I was
I think
hoping
that
it'd be a
looks good.
bit more of a savings, but
It's fine.
it's something. Thank you for remembering that. I meant to highlight that box yellow as a reminder in my column and forgot, so thanks.
Which is why, like, and for folks that are listening,
We will review this.
and you know, that's why we want a little bit of time here to make sure we've checked all the formulas, make sure that we have everything included. I'll have multiple eyes take a look at this. So, and we will send it to the commissioners in advance, and then I would probably just schedule just an item on the agenda for the 20th, just for discussion. You would not be formally voting on the 20th, but it would just be an item for discussion and for if there were any questions or concerns on the 20th.
And while the public will have an opportunity to give public comment
Yeah.
in that August 24th hearing, they would also have the opportunity to
On the
provide
20th.
public comment on the 20th.
Correct.
Great.
Correct.
This is Commissioner Reed again. I want to thank my fellow commissioners for all of the diligence and good conversation. I think we made some really solid choices and decisions and found a good balance. And staff, we appreciate what a thorough and transparent budget process you set up for us and for the community. I really appreciate it. Do you have anything else for good of the order this morning?
I would just want to echo, our appreciation for your work, commissioners. You have made this process really simple simple is probably not the right word, but helpful and professional and just thoughtful as to how we've approached this whole work. And I really appreciate all of your continued dedication to just to balance this need for some additional services in our community, but also a reduction of the mill levy to offset some increases in assessed valuation.
Ditto to all of the praise and happiness, and I appreciate how smoothly this process went. I do just want to clarify on our calendars, then we will not be
Yeah.
meeting tomorrow because
Correct.
we were super efficient in our conversations today, and Cammie is an absolute rock star in math on the fly, so.
And then we are not meeting Wednesday, just because we had a really, really light agenda and we've had so many meetings. So then we are meeting tomorrow though with the city of Lawrence in a joint city counties meeting at City Hall at 5 p.m. The agenda is affordable housing and homeless issues. And then this commission would meet again on the 20th. I will not be at that meeting. Jill will be running the meeting, and Cammie can be there just in case there are any questions related to budget, if that's all right with commissioners.
Since we're thanking people, I think we also should thank our community partners who, we've beefed up our budget request process in recent years, and that required a lot of time and effort in all those departments as well. And Sarah, thanks for meeting with all of them, and Cammie, I know you meet with them as well. I know that takes a lot of time, and they're trying to be thoughtful as well and understand the pressures on our community. So just really appreciate everybody's work on the process.
That's it.
This is Commissioner Reed. I believe we are adjourned. Have a good Monday, everybody.